Beautifully done, Dudley. Welcome back to Andertons TV. This is Dudley Ross. I've known you for a long time, but you sort of barely venture in front of the camera, do you?
Normally I'm back there somewhere, yeah.
So Dudley I've known for a few years. He's the guy that people like Josh Smith and Greg Koch and guys like that will turn to if they want to come and do some gigs in the UK, and Dud normally helps them out. But earlier this year, I saw you doing a Jeff Beck tribute tour with the lovely Jack Griffiths, who many of you will know from YouTube as well. And so when Epiphone, at the beginning of the summer, went, we've got an amazing sort of reissue of Jeff's kind of famous Oxblood Les Paul, but Epiphone branded now, so a little bit more affordable than the Gibson one in the past. I thought, I know the guy to invite down to play. So yes, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about the Jeff Beck thing that you did with Jack and how it came about, and how much of a deep dive into Jeff's gear did you have to do to sort of pull that off?
Well, I mean, obviously it was a big shock for everyone when Jeff passed away. And it felt wrong not to kind of acknowledge what an amazing career he'd had. So we, got teamed up with the first tour we actually did with, I think there was probably 25 guitarists involved. So we did like a tour around, and we had like a core band with John Noyce on bass and John Bucket on bass and Michael on drums, and we had like a core band, and then we picked up guitarists along the way. So we had everyone. Yeah, Phil Hilborn was one of the guys we had, Chris Mendenzo, and we kind of picked up loads of people and went around just wanting to kind of celebrate his music, and that's how we labelled it, the celebration of Jeff Beck's music. And some of the guys we had were, not massive, like, they didn't really do the Jeff Beck thing, but they wanted to honour Jeff Beck and do that. So that's how we did it, really. And we did that first tour, and it was really well received. And me and Jack, we said after, maybe we should do this again, not as like a thing we do regularly, but just every now and again, just do a few shows, just to kind of keep his music alive. And that's kind of how we went from there, really, and it's grown from that. Did you split it with Jack so that you did certain eras of Jeff and he did other eras, or did you just sort of share the songs? I mean, how did you work that out? We kind of like through, obviously the back catalogue of Jeff Beck is huge. So we went all the way back to Yardbirds and to the present day. So we did kind of like some old school stuff. And we just kind of like worked out what songs did we really love, what were we going to do. And we both kind of like supported each other. So obviously there's some rhythm parts, so we just played rhythm, and then one guy would just take like kind of the main bit, really. So it worked out really well. Me and Jack really complemented each other really well, because we're both big fans of Jeff Beck, but we come from maybe slightly different places. So it was really complemented each other really well. Cool.
When I think of Jeff Beck, I don't feel like he was synonymous with a single guitar through his career in the way that someone like Slash is synonymous with the Les Paul. If I was going to pick a guitar that I probably thought Jeff was synonymous with, it's probably a sign of the fact that I would have found out about Jeff maybe later in his career than some people. So I think of that.
Absolutely.
Or perhaps a Surf Green kind of version of that. And obviously this video is predominantly about this, but let's just take a minute to go through some of the guitars that perhaps you put together for your Jeff Beck tour, and what is it particularly about the Strat? Because it is a slightly modded Strat to a normal one. So, what
obviously
did he do?
The classic things like the roller nuts, that's the kind of the key thing, the locking nuts at the back, which obviously with all the bending you're doing and bar work, you need it. Before the first tour I played case guitars, which handmade guitars down in Kent, and they did that thing really well. And we got this really because it was just, a lot of people were sort of saying, why are you not playing a signature Strat? So it's kind of like, we got this, and I did use that plus the case guitars, but you can really abuse this guitar, and it holds up really well.
It's funny, isn't it? Because that roller nut, maybe we can get a zoom in on the nut. That was the sort of second iteration that Fender did. I think the first iteration had an issue that it was fine if you were using like 9 or 10 gauge strings, but the thicker strings wouldn't fit through it. And then that sort of second iteration was a little bit more versatile from...
Yeah,
but
these were 11s on there, so that, they do work with 11s.
Yeah, but I can see, he was such a, using the tremolo arm as such an integral part of his sound. I can understand that it must have been very difficult to find a conventional bone nut that kept the tuning in the way that perhaps
Absolutely.
the roller. And yet he was probably the only artist that ever really adopted the roller nut as a thing.
Yeah.
Because it was in the Fender catalogue for, I don't know, 5 years or whatever like
Yeah.
that, and then they moved on. But he kept it, didn't he?
It wasn't very fashionable, I guess, but you know, with Jeff, obviously, he just wanted things that made him do what he could, the voice he had in his mind. You know, he could do that, and no string trees, like it's literally just straight through to the.
Are they the sort of the tapered machine heads, so the sort of the bottom is slightly taller than...
That's it.
It's so weird, isn't it? My very first... I think I've got it here somewhere. Yeah. People who've, I don't know, maybe watched the channel forever might know this was like my first proper guitar.
Right.
And when I bought this was surf green with the pearl scratch plate on it, tapered locking tuners. It was very... not intentionally Jeff Becky, but I bought it second hand basically. It was a sort of obviously the previous owner had must have had sort of like a Jeff Beck thing going on. But yes, it's a great guitar. And he was, again, very much a user of noiseless pickups, wasn't he?
Absolutely,
he was a fan of the lace sensors and then more recently the sort of the Fender noiseless.
Yeah.
Two-post trem system. So all about, again, I think keeping the guitar fluid,
Absolutely.
trying to avoid tuning issues. Anyway, that for me was sort of what, 80s, 90s Jeff?
Yeah.
What else was going on perhaps maybe earlier in his career? And
Well, he has played everything. You know, he went through the rockabilly stuff as well. So he was doing, you know, the Gretsch and old Gibsons, and obviously that was only kind of like a sort of niche thing he did. But you know, he had the telly, which is and obviously the Oxblood, which was a big part of his early blow-by-blow era, which was a big part of what he did then.
Did you ever manage to get yourself one of those pink Jackson, I don't know, was it like what was it called, like a surf, no, not a surf caster, what was his Jackson? Anyway, I remember that. What was the Tina Turner?
It was Private Dancers, the song he played on with that guitar, and then she scratched her name into it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that was there's press photographs of him with that, and it's such an 80s.
Yeah.
It's so Spinal Tap, isn't it? That sort of era of sort of, you know, Jeff's career.
Absolutely.
We tried to put together a little pedal board that was reminiscent of the board that Jeff was using as a sort of a fly board towards the end of his career. Jumped on a bunch of amplifiers here. So we've got the Marshall Studio JTM in the corner that you might not be able to see. We've got a Fender Blues Deluxe in the middle, and we've got a Magnatone Super 15. All, in fact, maybe when I give you the Les Paul, maybe we'll just hear them on their own. And we were sort of trying to use combinations of them to see where we were getting a good sound. They're all pretty clean, right?
Yeah.
They're not,
yeah.
Seeing as this is the sort of the guitar that's been launched this year and the one I wanted to predominantly focus on, tell me a little bit about Blow by Blow. Was that the album that really put him on the map as a solo artist, do you think?
I think so. Yeah, that is the one. That is his first Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
You know, recording it. You know, all instrumental as well. Instrumental album. I think I should remember the stats, but I think it sold. You know, it sold really well. It's one of his best-selling albums, and for an instrument album to do that well, it was a real kind of like you know, statement in his career. Yeah. And it kind of really set where he was going.
I remember my first Jeff Beck album that I ever really listened to was the Guitar Shop one with the sort of the automobile kind of front cover. It began to get a bit more sort of proggy and a bit more sort of up-tempo by that. But if we go back to Blow by Blow, the bit that I was amazed with is obviously arguably his most famous song, We Enders Lovers, is from that album. And every live performance I've ever seen of that song has so many trills and swells and stuff, which I feel is synonymous with that guitar. And yet, as far as you're aware, this is the guitar
the whole album was done apparently. So we actually played with Richard Bailey. He played on the album. The first shows we did, Richard Bailey got up in the London show and played Because We're Enders Lovers with us, and apparently it was all that guitar.
Well, I'm going to hand this over to you now as an expert, and I think what we'll do is we'll pop the Magnatone back in so that you can choose what combination of amps you want to use are, and we can talk a little bit about the pedal board too. For now, we're just using the Fender and the Marshall as a blend. This is the first time you've played this guitar, isn't it, this morning?
Yeah, I walked in and picked up, and not that I'm, everything at Epiphone aren't as good as Gibson, but I was like expected it to be not as comfortable, because I have got an Oxblood Les Paul, and I was nicely surprised, to feel actually, wow, this is very comfortable, and that's not me just saying that either. I'm being honest, it It feels great, sounds good. It doesn't feel like maybe you think, oh, it's a lesser instrument, 'cause it's really not there.
So you can go onto the website and read the spec of this, but it's basically it was actually a 50s gold top Les Paul, which you can see from the sort of the wraparound tailpiece, which would have been correct as per its original design. And it's been redone in the Oxblood, which I guess is now synonymous with Jeff. So this is a sort of a faithful repro of that by Epiphone. And it's very much sitting in this new, sort of the last year or two of Epiphone guitars, where they're really, really trying to up-spec the guitars to sit now in that sort of £1,000 to £1,500 range. And every Epiphone that I've played so far that sits in that, a lot of the inspired by Gibson Custom Shop and things like that, is a real treat to play. I mean, they're just beautiful, beautiful guitars. And as you say, if I just handed you this and said, oh, try this new Gibson Jeff Beck, you'd be like, all right, it's great.
Wouldn't know any different.
So you've got all the Gibson custom buckers in there, all the correct kind of, the CTS pots and all the Mallory kind of caps and stuff that would be in a guitar of 3 times the money. I believe the tuners, again, have been put on to replicate the ones that Jeff would have had on his guitar. Rosewood board, obviously, maple cap, mahogany body. Let's have a little listen. And I'm really intrigued as to how you play that iconic song on a Les Paul.
Yeah, I guess, and it obviously loses a lot of volume control and.
Does it feel like do you want more reverb, less reverb?
Oh, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good. So we're just using the reverb from the amp, and we've got a little Bell Epoch from Catlin Bread to do that little bit of slapback that's on the sort of sound.
But I mean, with the spec-wise, if I was to, you saw that written down, I would be totally happy with the spec. There's nothing in there that makes me think, oh, I'm not getting a good instrument. And it feels great. It's a chunky C neck, but it feels. All the pickups respond how you want with the volume. It's all there.
I just want to hear you kind of play and maybe stomp on. So we sort of set this up with a J-Rocket Archer, which again definitely Jeff was using and actually working with before he passed away to sort of do his own version of, which is a clone by the way, if you didn't know, and set very much with the sort of the gain very low. So it's just like an always-on fattening kind of pedal. We've chosen like a Wampler Cryptive Fuzz, just if we want to get some of that much more, I guess, sort of fuzzy Jeff Beck kind of tone. The Bell Epoch for a bit of slapback. And that's it. The reverb's coming from the amp. And the amps are all clean, right? So in fact, if you do the sort of, if we can have a little listen to each amp, that would be great.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So let's take off the Fender. So do you want it totally clean with nothing to start off with?
Maybe just leave the Bell Epoch on, because it's otherwise the Marshall's going to be very dry.
So that's the Marshall. Put it in the middle pickup, everything up full at the moment. And we've got the Fender. Nice, and then we put a bit of the Archer on.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the Marshall. The Fender. Lovely. Nice.
I think the Marshall one is the one that
feels right.
As far as I'm aware, I did see Jeff doing some live stuff with Blues Deluxes.
Yeah.
As far as the Marshall and the Magnetone is concerned, he would not have been using these exact ones. So we've got the little studio JTM. He'd have been a full bore JTM or Plexi kind of user. And then with the Magnetone, again, I think he's using one of the bigger ones, the Varsity. So I can't think how radically different a Varsity is to a Super 15. I don't think it's radically different. But a lot of, I mean, as you can see recently with people like Slash and Billy Gibbons and Richard Fortis, a lot of perhaps traditionally Marshall players have started using Magnetone sort of over the last decade or so. I think it's probably, the Magnetone's probably more in that Marshall-y camp than in the Fender one. But he was such a versatile guitar player, I almost think you could plug him into anything and he'd sound like Jeff Beck.
A lot of it was in his fingers, obviously, you know, it all plays a part, but... You know.
Well, let's just, I mean, we've heard a little bit of the guitar. It would be good just to have a little bit more sort of extended playing, if you just wouldn't mind maybe just... And again, feel free to stomp on. We haven't had much with the fuzz yet,
let's do a bit of the fuzz. And for the purist, obviously, he did use the plectrum from time to time, so I'll go between a bit of plectrum and a bit of fingers, just so you guys can hear. Still there?
I've got to be honest with you, you can see why he was the guitarist, can't you? Because although, you know, arguably he perhaps didn't have the prolific back catalogue of hits in inverted commas that some musicians have, he just had a touch, didn't he? He under his fingers. I've never seen any clip of Jeff Beck playing that I didn't think was like just wow.
For me, that's the really thing for me is I spent a lot of time as a guitarist. I went through Steve Vai, Joe, I love all those guys still, they're amazing. There's something about Jeff Beck, he would play one note and I'd be like, what's going on with that one note? And I've spent hours going through like a phrase and I'm like, I'm playing the right notes, but I can't make it sound like that. Just something else going on. And that's the thing that, for me as a guitarist, I know Jack was the same as, that we always trying to, what's he doing? How's he connecting that with the guitar? And for me, I'm always trying to find that. And he was the guy who really pulled that off.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it, particularly maybe the earlier stuff, he was able to tame insane amounts of volume. I think so much of that expression was that the rig would have been loud. But he would have been getting everything from 1% through to 100% of what that rig could do.
And he was like, you know, I know people, obviously Nicholas Meyer, who played with we did the last tour, Nicholas who toured with Jeff, and he said that he was loud. He was loud, you know, he was loud on stage, and he used to have like side fills of him pumping through, you know. But that's kind of part of my appeal with Jeff Beck, is that he was kind of like, you know, warts and all, you know, old school guitarist, loud, you know, he wouldn't, if you put a digital pedal in front of him, he'd probably kind of like throw it against the wall, you know. As much as I love that stuff as well, but I kind of like his kind of like really direct approach and no bullshit, basically.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I've said this on YouTube loads of times, but I only ever saw him live once, but it was, if you were going to see him once, I think I just lucked out and saw the gig. But I was at the Ronnie Scott's.
Oh my God!
With Tal and Vinny and I never remember the keyboard player's name, but
Jason Rebella.
That's it.
Yeah.
I was watching some of the guitar sounds that were coming out, and I think it was 2 Marshall JTMs or something like that. this, the brand wasn't terribly expensive, but it was not a terribly famous one, but it was like a wedge, it's like a pointed end overdrive pedal.
Right.
And it was a very simple pedal board. There wasn't a lot. I don't know what the reverb was coming from, I must admit, whether that was front of house or what. But he would play this insane kind of synthy vibed runs. And I was like, how's he doing that? And then I would just sort of see out the corner of my eye, it's the keyboard player's tracking the runs as well. So you get, I mean, it was just like, and the whole thing was just like mind-numbingly good. But then I love all that stuff that you see of him playing the big stadiums and stuff where he's got the silver armbands around and the white singlet and everything. And it's just like, he's just an uber rock star.
Oh yeah, totally cool. I came very close to meeting him. It's a bit of a sad story really, and I wish I'd just been a bit braver, but I was actually playing a gig and he walked in and I was like, oh my God. And at that point I was going through a real Jeff Beck stage. So I was like, everything I was doing was like Jeff Beckisms, and I was like, oh my God, I can't do this in front of Jeff, you know. So I was like panic mode. And then we finished the first set and he was like, came over and looked at, and I was I meet a lot of people, you know, in the guitar world, and I'm never like, oh, scared to meet, but Jeff Beck, I just couldn't go and speak to him because I was like, I'm going to say something really stupid. So I just kind of like keep moving away from him. And I just had up, he was there looking at my pedal board, looking at my amps, and I just should have gone over, Jeff, but I didn't do it. And to this day, I'm really sad that I didn't do that.
It was part of his thing, wasn't it? He had a sort of bit of mystery around him because I think he was pretty, what's the right word? I know from talking to Fender, he wasn't the guy that would just do stuff for money. Everything had to be right for him to want to be involved with stuff. And he was a bit reclusive. And
I've heard some great stories about him. I mean, everything's been, you know, he did everything for the right reason, and you know, he was really into his, you know, wildlife conversation. You know, conversation. He used to really like kind of like support like and that's a big part of why I guess I graduated with him, because I can connect to his kind of mindset. And as I've got older, I've cared less about what people think about my playing and stuff like that. Where I'll be like, oh no, people don't like. I'll be like, okay, I do what I do. Yeah. You know, and that's the kind of attitude that I think he was just very much like. You know.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you down to talk about this.
Pleasure.
I mean, you got any questions? Pop them in the comments section. We'll see if we can answer it. But yeah, I mean, as a last 2-minute summary of what do you think of the guitar? I can tell you it's $11.99. It comes with a nice hard case. All the spec is on the Andertons website. There'll be a link below here. I think the thing for me that Epiphone are nailing on these slightly more expensive guitars now is they're using a new style of finish on these. So it's not full nitro, so it doesn't have the cost attached that nitro does. But it's not that heavy, thick, sort of gloopy polyurethane that you might find on you know, perhaps previous and cheaper Epiphone models. It's a real interesting, authentic feeling finish on that guitar. So you do think you've got a Gibson in your hands.
I mean, like I said, I brought an Oxblood Gibson before the last tour, and if you put these in my hands, the difference in price is again. I mean, I'm not just saying this. It's a quality instrument. You know, I wouldn't be disappointed if someone said, "This, you got to play that guitar." I would be totally happy. You know, it's all there. You know, the pickups respond really well. The access is really great. So especially I've got massive hands, so I can get right up there with no problem, and it just feels comfortable. It's good.
Come on then. Well, look, I'd love to hear you play for another minute or two just to sort of finish off. But thank you for joining us. Please like and subscribe. Go check out Dudley's website as well. We'll put links below to that if you want to find out when he's playing next in your area. And yeah, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Catch you guys later.